Our next speaker is a humanist chaplain at New York University. Dr. Ann Klaeysen is a leader at the New York Society for Ethical Culture, ethical humanist, religious life advisor at Columbia University. She works at the Human Institute. We like to hear from her on a different kind of immortality. Please.
We come together from the diversity of our grieving to gather in the warmth of this community, giving stubborn witness to our belief that in times of sadness, there's room for laughter. In times of darkness, there always will be light. May we hold fast to the conviction that what we do with our lives matters, and that a caring world is possible after all. Good morning. My name is Ann Klaeysen, and I'm a leader of the New York Society for Ethical Culture. I welcome you into this time and space that are made sacred with the spirit of love and friendship you bring as we gather to remember and to mourn Eve, or Adam. We come together as family, friends, neighbors, and colleagues, co-creators of a community that includes those present, but also family and friends who could not be here today. A memorial service is an act of loving leave-taking and a celebration of life. We don't need protection from grief, but rather time and the means to express it, to experience it, and to live through it. A memorial service is for those who have loved and lost, who miss loved ones and must go on living without them. Shakespeare wrote in Macbeth, "Give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak whispers the o'er-fraught heart and bids it break." This morning, we will give sorrow words. Some of you will share your memories. Others will sit quietly and reflect. Together, we will invoke Eve's or Adam's spirit and celebrate her life. Before I say these words at an ethical culture or ethical humanist memorial service, I meet with a family and I hear their stories. Sometimes we have a private family memorial service before the public one because there's often so much unfinished business. So many stories to tell, so much love to share, so many hurts to air. Sometimes I know the person who has died. Maybe I've visited that person in the hospital. Maybe I've fended off some of the people you've spoken about. Maybe sometimes I've held their hands in hospice. And I've officiated at services after a religious funeral. Yes, some of you, especially you, Margaret, talked about the daughter and how painful that was and how you addressed that pain so well. I've sometimes been called in by a family who has had to endure a religious funeral and then have asked me to perform or to officiate at a memorial service. And the last time I did that, I did it at the Essex Society, which is in Maplewood, New Jersey. And interestingly enough, most of the family who had been at that religious funeral did participate in the memorial. And it was very different from anything that they had experienced. And at the end, there was something particularly different. The young woman who died loved to dance. She was a party girl, not only in her youth, but also as a mother, and she loved to sing and dance and laugh. And so with her family, we had decided that at the end, we would invite everyone to clear the dance floor and we danced the electric slide. And I have to tell you that many of the family members who were there appreciated it and understood why it was so important to her family to have this other memorial service. I've also officiated memorials for 3 men who committed suicide, who killed themselves. They were all white, middle class, and fathers. And I was so moved last night by Jennifer's story from her book, Stay, because all of those families so longed for their husbands, fathers, brothers, sons to stay. But they didn't. And so it was important for the memorial service to reflect that, to speak the truth, to be honest about what had happened. And in each case, I had people come up to me afterwards and thank me because in their own families, in their own circle of friends, people had committed suicide and it was hidden. Children grew up not knowing that a parent, an aunt, an uncle had killed themselves. They knew something was wrong, but they were never told the truth. A memorial service has a job to do. And when I meet with a family, I tell them it has a particular job to do. It's going to hold some, but not all of your grief. You're going to celebrate this life, but you're going to find many other opportunities to do so. What we hope to accomplish in this service is to set you on a particular path so that you understand where you're going. I think the Jewish tradition is wonderful. There's something called the yahrzeit. And during that year's period, you make no major decisions. And at the end of that year, you assess. You assess what has happened. You reflect again upon that life and the meaning of that life. Many of you have referred to the different organizations, and I appreciate that. I hope that you will also include the American Ethical Union, Ethical Culture. We too do that. We also certify, we train and certify healthcare chaplains as well as ethical culture clergy. The theme for us always is about love, always about love. My favorite dead ethical culture leader is John Lovejoy Elliott. We often say that Felix Adler, who is the founder, has a rather austere presence. He was actually kind of funny. Apparently he liked puns. I'm not a fan of puns, nevertheless. John Lovejoy Elliott started Hudson Guild, which is still active now. It's a settlement house. And settlement houses, unlike a lot of other philanthropic organizations, had at the center of their mission, of their goal, being good neighbors, creating a community, empowering people so that they could understand and articulate their own needs, empower them to make that happen. So here's one of my favorite quotations from John Lovejoy Elliott. "The love of the human heart is the most real and the most beautiful of all the realities we know. It is the richest gift of our humanity. It is the love that joins us together as lovers, as husband and wife, as mother and father, as parent and child, as friends and neighbors. Whatever the length of time may be, to have known something of this together is to have experienced the supreme privilege of being human. The anguish of parting cannot destroy that most real of all realities. The love has been. The affection has existed. The ties have been woven. Life has been shared, the joys and sorrows, and this has been as real and as strong as anything in life. The love that was once born can never die, for it has become part of us, the very texture of our being. Each of us would like to leave some subtle part of ourselves, some subtle part of ourselves. And we do that in our relationships, in our community. In ethical culture, we talk about ethicizing relationships, acting so as to elicit the best in others and thereby ourselves. And by best, we don't mean some superlative quality, but rather that unique quality within every human being that we choose to attribute to them and we seek to find and we seek to bring out. And that's what we do throughout our whole lives. How do we actually address death in ethical culture? Well, one way, recently, a very practical way, is an import from the UK, and that's called the Death Cafe. Have any of you heard of this? Another import from the UK is Sunday Assembly. Right? Yeah, and by the way, I'm on the board of the Sunday Assembly, NYC, and the first Sunday of the month at 2 o'clock, they hold their program at the Society, Ethical Culture. So, the Death Cafe is not as moribund as it sounds. In fact, it's a very joyful place. And when they meet in our building, in fact, it's one of our ethical enrichment programs, and they meet twice a month. You will hear music, singing. You will have some meditation, maybe some movement as well. The notion is, given that we are mortal, how do we live our lives to the fullest? And it's interesting that there are a number of older people there who come so that they can have that conversation with other people because their children don't want to hear it. They want to explain to their children, I have a health proxy, I have a living will, I have a DNR. As some people were saying before, I don't want a religious person, I don't want a funeral, et cetera, and the children don't want to hear it. Mom, you're never going to die. Dad, they're the first people who are never going to die. And so they get together in this community so that they can share that experience with one another, knowing that we are going to die. Guess what? That's part of being a human being. And we want to celebrate this life as long as we're here. And so they do some practical things. They make sure that they have a health proxy. They make sure that they have a living will and a DNR. They put all their paperwork in place and make sure that other people know where it is. I keep in my office at Ethical Culture some files of my members so that they know and I know and their families know that I have that information. When I was leader at the Long Island Society, the Ethical Humanist Society of Long Island in Garden City, that was a tradition that was started by my predecessor, Arthur Dobrin. And I remember the time when it came in so handy. A very dear member died, and I have to confess, this was my first posting as an ethical culture leader, and I was in denial that Arlene was dying, and I fear that I didn't serve her well. Fortunately, my predecessor was still there, and he had a very close relationship with her too. And so she died, and her children were, of course, bereft and had no idea what to do, none whatsoever. And I said, don't worry, Arlene left a file, and it's all here, and indeed it was all there. Who would speak? What kind of music would be played? What song we should all sing together? It was all there. It was the greatest gift that Arlene could give her children. Along those lines, let me tell you that is a very important component of an ethical will. We have legal wills, and the legal will lets people know to whom we wish to bequeath our property, our money, our property, our diamonds, or whatever. An ethical will is a way of communicating to others our values. How do we pass on our values? So at the Death Cafe and also at another program we offer called Empowering Ethical Elders, I've given workshops on composing an ethical will. And if you Google it, you will find that there are so many resources now for an ethical will. There are people who will do it for you. I don't recommend that. You need to go through the process yourself. It's the process even more than the product. Sometimes people feel that they have nothing to leave their families. There's no money left. There's nothing to give them. To be able to write an ethical will is to say, here's who I am, here's how much I love you, here's what I valued, and here is my legacy to you in terms of my philosophy, maybe even my advice. It is invaluable, and I highly, highly recommend it. And it can be in many forms. It can be in the form of a letter, a videotape, a recording, a scrapbook. It can be in so many different forms, and you don't have to wait until you die. You can actually have a moment and sit down with your family and your friends and say, I want to share this with you. What a wonderful conversation that is. What a wonderful experience. The woman I told you about, Arlene, her husband, Will, died a few years before she did. And so he did something that was also unusual. And that is, he decided to have a memorial while he was living. And he invited family and friends, and he got to hear all the wonderful things they had to say about him. And he, in turn, got to say wonderful things about them. Joan Beater, one of the members of the Long Island Society, who teaches at a graduate level at Yeshiva University, wrote this up as a journal article and encouraged other people to do it. I've encouraged my members to do it. Timing is everything, isn't it? Because a couple of members who wanted to do that, the timing just didn't work out. A word about chaplains. I am an ethical humanist religious life advisor at Columbia, and the university chaplain Jill Nell Davis arranged for us to meet with first-year medical students at Columbia to talk with them about our different experiences. And so, as you might imagine, I spoke to them about many of the things that you've heard already. I gave them the story of one of my members, Moira, who was in hospice, and a nurse came into the room and said, "It's okay, dear, it's okay, don't be afraid." And I was in the room and Moira said, "What the hell are you talking about? I'm not afraid. Why would I be afraid? I've had a long, beautiful life. I've had people who love me." And the nurse looked, but again, the staff, I want to believe they mean well because I choose to attribute worth and dignity to everyone. But I have to say that in my Myers-Briggs personality index, judgment shoots right up there. And so I was glad I was with Moira to be able to explain to this woman that that was really not helpful at all. Another thing that I do at the Ethical Society, and my colleagues do this as well, is offer a reflection on how to live with dying. And when we do that, we have sort of a circle, and we play some nice soothing music. We start with an opening go-around, request that participants share their names, invite them to answer a question: what brings you here today? What feelings or images does a thought of your own death evoke in you? How would you like people to remember you? If the group is a large one, we might use just one question. If it's smaller, we might use more questions. The idea is to elicit those responses from the people in the group. And then I have readings. And we sort of bounce off some of those readings. This is one of my favorites. It's called Letter to My Children by Peggy Gallagher. When I'm dead, put me in a box with a fat book, thermos, good dark chocolate, a lock of sonnets, ones with a stake through the heart. The photographs I never got to sort. A torch, don't forget the torch. The satin lining with a whiff of lily, ruched and slippery, portents of menace and mercy. Rumors of resin, mortise, and tenon sans rivets or lead. Worms overhead. Earth settling on the lid. Forget all that grave-tending lark. The dead don't give a rap. the soul is not in residence. It's out there somewhere, desperately seeking flight exit. I never was one for finding my way easy. Watch sometime when a shadow tracks the evening grass, or perhaps when a small bird crashes the glass. Do we need more than that? I don't think we do, and I don't think it's necessary, and we need to honor the people who don't want any kind of religious intervention. And even when I offer people a humanist memorial service, some of them don't want it. A dear, dear member who for many years ran our homeless shelter, women's homeless shelter, died recently. So of course, I had seen her in hospice. I called her daughter. I said, let's be thinking about the memorial. And Stephanie said, we can't. Maria was very clear, no memorial service, nothing. And I said, well, the heck with that. She's not here. We're going to have one. And Stephanie said, no, we really can't. So we're working out some other way. And that other way will probably be at the celebration that we have every year. We have a dinner to thank the volunteers in our homeless shelter. And Maria always came. Even when she wasn't feeling well, she always came. So in June, when we have the dinner and we thank the volunteers in our homeless shelter, we will also be celebrating Maria Friedman. Felix Adler, founder of ethical culture, said, "The dead are not dead if we love them truly. In our own lives, we can give them a kind of immortality. Let us arise and take up the work they have left unfinished. Take a moment now to remember what you most admired about Eve or Adam. Remember what most endeared her to you. Do you have it? Good. Hold on to it. Now imagine incorporating that quality, that gift, into your own lives. Love her, honor her, give her immortality by taking up the work she has left unfinished." The act is done. The words have been said. The gate of the coming hour now opens to us in peace. Let us go through with thanksgiving for all that we said and did in this hour. Blessed is the mystery of life and death, which is our own. And blessed be love forever. Thank you.